Welcome everyone to the Preschool Mindfulness Summit. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Diane Gerhardt. She's been on our Mindfulness and Education Summit last year, and she's also coming on our Mindful Kids Peace Summit this year. And she does lots and lots of work in this area, so and especially with young kids. So I thought it would be great for her to come on and tell us a little bit about that. She has a book called Mindfulness for Chocolate Lovers, a lighthearted way to stress less and savor more each day. So we'll have a link to that in her speaker bio. And she's a professor in the Marriage and Family Therapy program at California State University, and also has several other books which we will put in her speaker bio if you want to find out more. And she's very kindly given us some video lessons to show you. So that's in her resource link. You can see mindfulness in action there. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So tell us first of all about how you got started with mindfulness in preschools.
Well, I had been doing mindfulness for years as a therapist and using it with families and family therapy, a lot around the issues of ADHD primarily. And then I had two of my own kids. And so when they were in school, I had to think of a parent volunteer. Right? We had to do 20 hours at my kids' school of parent volunteer time. And it was hard because I'm a working mother and I have strange hours as a professor. And so the first year I ended up doing weekends, doing the book fair, which really wasn't fulfilling at all. And it was kind of a train wreck, quite frankly. So I went to the principal and I said, would you be interested in a mindfulness program? Because that's fun for me to do. And let's try it. So it ended up being it started as a parent volunteer program, although I had been working with kids and adults in a therapeutic realm. I've never had done it in a school context. And the school that my boys go to just happens to have both a preschool and a K-5 school, and the principal wanted it for all the grades, starting at 3 years old up to the 12-year-olds, which is really evolved. It's three separate, because the developmental span there, as we all know, is pretty immense. We have about three, when we're trying to teach a particular lesson, there's three different ways we teach it. And so the preschoolers, they require, and they are the most challenging. I'm by nature, by profession, I am a college professor. So I've been teaching graduate students for 22 years. And I always say, whoa, going into that preschool classroom and teaching them mindfulness for 15 minutes is the most challenging thing I've ever done in my teaching career, because it really stretches your skills, right? It's a lot of different areas of life to teach. So it was really fun. I had just amazing luck. One of my students entering my program that time was David Siegel, who you might be hearing from, I believe. But he had been a preschool teacher who was into mindfulness and had actually started doing some stuff in his preschool. He happened to start my program when I was starting this program, so I was blessed to have him and some of that resource with me, because I certainly had the mindfulness background, but making it applicable to 3, 4, and 5-year-olds it really is different than teaching adults, teens, and even after 3rd grade. I would say that preschool to about 1st grade, those years, 3 to 7-ish, 6, 7, 3 to 6 really. It's really different than as you move further up. But I've been really surprised how much they learn and how loved it is in the preschool, this particular program. So that's how I got started. It's kind of a long-winded tour of how I got there. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love also that your son's principal was so up for it and wanted it to put it in throughout the school. So must be a great school for kids to be in. That's so open-minded. Yeah. So Diane, tell us. You talk about 5 ways to get started. So let's go through. Tell us what the first one is.
Well, the first thing that I found to be the most critical, the program that we built and put together, and we used some of the MindUp curriculum. I integrated some of the stuff I had been doing therapeutically for families. But what I was surprised, the heart of the program that we developed is teaching the kids about basically two parts of the brain. We make it very brain-based, which is similar to the MindUp curriculum. But we use Dan Siegel's very simplified model of the brain. Dan Siegel is a researcher at UCLA who's done a lot of work looking at the brain. He started with interpersonal neurobiology, and he's also done research in the brain and mindfulness. So we use his little. I'm sure many of you know this. Not everyone I've found does, so I'm going to do it real quickly. Here's Dan Siegel's handy model of the brain, and here's your brain stem. This is the part of the brain that just keeps your heart beating, your lungs moving, and technically this is the reptilian part of the brain, but just stick with me. We're working with preschoolers, and so, but that is technically, if you're gonna, at the college level, that is the reptilian part. The next part we talk about is the limbic system. This is the stress response, the fight, flight, freeze mechanism. And we refer to this in the program as the lizard brain, because quite frankly, it reminds me, what does a lizard do? It sits there looking for danger all day long, just scanning the environment. Is anything dangerous? Looking for food? Anything dangerous? And that's our limbic system, our stress response. And then we teach them about the prefrontal cortex, which one of the students in the first year named the smart part of the brain, because that is where math, language, reasoning, good decision-making, executive functioning is. And so what happens is when we get stressed, we quote unquote flip our lids and we get the reptilian brain takes over. And the prefrontal cortex, the more stressed you are, the less of it is actually online, because basically our limbic system is really fast, and it's made to help us fight a bear, run from a bear, or freeze, if you think, and stay perfectly still so the bear doesn't see us. So that is what that part does really well. It's got speed in it. It's kind of like a lizard. And that's the smart part. So we talk about, put mindfulness in the context of, and especially in the school context, this is one of the pieces that has helped us get the teachers buy-in, the principal and the parents buy-in, is that mindfulness can help the kids to put their smart parts back on so they can do their lessons, math, and learn. So you need that part. The lizard part of the brain does not actually do a lot of math, English, reasonable, problem solving. That's where the temper tantrums are, quite frankly, in the preschool. So, and the preschool teachers get this right away. We're like, when the kids flip their lid, you don't use a lot of language in preschool. It's a good example. I use this when I'm teaching with parents. If you've got a kid 5 and under, when they throw a tantrum, they flip their lids, and there's literally no language, and you'll notice that. So don't talk. There's not a lot of talking reason to a toddler or any kid under 5 doesn't work, and it's because of this. So the parents loved it, the teachers loved it, and the thing that surprised me the most is that the kids get it. I mean, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds get it. They get lizard brain, they get prefrontal, they get smart part. They understand what it means to flip their lids, and they learn to see it in their peers. And so we always talk about when someone's flipped their lids, first of all, you never tell anyone that they flipped their lid when they have, because they will argue against you. This is true throughout the whole life spectrum. So you can tell a 65-year-old they just flipped their lids and they're going to argue, because lizards will argue about that. So we teach them about noticing it in others, noticing in themselves, and using some very simplified, obviously, mindfulness techniques to work. But that distinction creates motivation both in the kids, and it helps the kids, I think, even motivate them to self-regulate a little bit. So I was really surprised how well 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds get that concept. And certainly when you get into actual elementary school ages, they really do. And once they hit 2nd, 3rd grade, they're really able to do some amazing things with that insight. So that's the first tip, is actually, you think preschool, how much of brain science are you going to teach to them? But that basic distinction, they get it. And it's important, I think.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree. I mean, I think people underestimate sometimes how clever kids are. So tell us, you make it very child friendly with puppets and playful things. So maybe could you demonstrate or show us some of the puppets that you use in your mindfulness training?
You know, I am sorry to say that it is a national holiday and the school is closed.
Oh.
So my puppet Bob, he's locked up at the school because I don't.
Okay.
But I will tell you this: but you can see on my website, mindfulschool.net, we even have a whole tab, I believe, for Bob, the chameleon, and he represents the lizard brain. And I brought in puppets because as a child therapist, I had used lots of puppets in the past to teach kids things, and especially at that age range, there's something about, I learned as a therapist, often kids can't tell you the story, but if I take out some puppets and we act out what happened on the playground and why they got upset or, what happened at home, they can tell the story that way. So I knew that little kids tell stories much better with puppets. So, and I found this beautiful chameleon puppet. We've named him Bob. He's on the Mindful, like I said, you can still buy him. I'm so excited. I found he's still on the market because my Bob is, God help me, he is probably 20 years old. Started when I was 12. And I will tell you, if you do name your puppet, you may want to think about the name of the principal at the school, because the head administrator, it's run by there's a principal and the business manager, I guess, at the school. There are two heads of the school. His name is Bob, and I didn't realize this. I was teaching with Bob, the puppet, doing the bad behavior for years, because Bob was named before. That puppet was named before I did it at the school. So anyway, one day I realized, oh my God, these kids probably have all these names all mixed up. But we do use puppets, to personify the lizard brain, and we have the puppet try to do whatever the mindfulness exercise is, like listening to the sound of the chime, or trying to eat mindfully, and we have the puppet do it, and and of course he's a lizard, so he only has a lizard brain. So for example, when he goes to demonstrate listening to the chime meditation, we ring the chime and we say, Bob, just tell us what thoughts are going through your head. The instructions are, I want you to be, just focus on your breath and listen to the sound of the chime, and try not to let your mind wander into any other topics. And so, we have Bob go chime, 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 floor, rug, shoe, lunch, so, his mind starts wandering. We demonstrate, he demonstrates for everyone. And we're like, no, Bob, the chime, focus on the chime. And the kids all laugh. We have a good time doing it. And then, we have Bob fail a few times, and we say, kids, do you think you can do it better than Bob? And of course, that competition, as any preschool teacher knows, that works pretty well. And I think it's kind of benign because they're just competing, not against each other, but against Bob, this puppet. So, let's see if you can show Bob how to do it. And so we use Bob to get the kids buy-in, and especially the preschool, this is a hit. But we've been doing it now for 3 years. And so as the kids move through, even the teachers are like, oh, don't bring a puppet into, third, fourth, fifth grade. They're too big. But the kids ask us to go back. And oh my God, one time we did an exercise where we weren't going to use Bob. And the kids were like, where's Bob? And we had to go make up a story how Bob was on vacation. So anyway, if you do get into puppets, it has become a school mascot. And so the kids they've just loved this Bob puppet. He's a little character. And I get my new interns, because I use interns from the Marriage Family Therapy program at university. I'm like, puppeting skills is part of the job, and let's see your Bob. But it's a great tool, and it's, puppets are definitely used at the preschool level. And I think if you can, there's some beautiful lizard ones on the market, and they can demonstrate it. It creates that motivation. It's fun. They laugh. And then we have them try. And it really has worked out beautifully for us using the puppets to help teach mindfulness.
Yeah, I love, using puppets. They just capture the preschoolers' attention, and I've seen the lizard the last time, so recommend everyone go and check out the video because he's very cute, and it might give you some ideas of using your own puppets to teach mindfulness. mindfulness. So Diane, tell us now, what is the third tip that you have for preschoolers?
Well, the third tip is to keep it short and fun. And I think that's true with most everything at the preschool level. And it's particularly true, I think, with mindfulness. And so many of our practice sessions, the time where they're practicing mindfulness is often just 1 to 3 minutes. The longest I think I've ever done, and this was truly one of my most prized teaching moments in my life, where I got a room of 4-year-olds to stand still for like statues as I blew bubbles with a bubble machine it was 4 to 5 minutes I did. It was the second time that we've been working up to this whole thing. But that was really, I think, the longest I've ever done. And so it's really keeping it extremely short, because, that's naturally where their attention is. And it does need to be fun. God, there is a sweet balance in terms of keeping it fun, but also having the mindful experience and getting them to slow down, watch their breath. And so there needs to be playful, but there's also balancing it so that the kids don't get overstimulated. And especially because, I think if you're the preschool teacher day in and day out, there's less risk of that. But if you are an outside third party coming into this room, just being there in the room as a different teacher, gets them excited and hyper. And then you bring in we bring in the puppets. It's got that entertainment piece. And so we have to find this sweet spot where we have their attention. It's not a chore. It's not painful. It's interesting and fun. It's playful, but it's still able to get them into a calmer space by the end. Oh, and it's certainly if you're the guest coming in to do mindfulness, I learned this lesson very quickly. Make sure you leave the kids in a mindful state, because sometimes, we get carried away with Bob, or the kids, it ends up too silly. I always make sure I use the mindfulness with the kids. I always say, I want to return you to your teachers with your smart parts on, so you're ready to do some more work.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and that's one of the big things really that differentiates makes it developmentally appropriate, is just those really short, 30 seconds, 1 minute activities, like you mentioned. And then I know you also get the kids to ask lots of questions, and so there's a whole mix of things that happen. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the other thing I was pleasantly surprised to find, as someone kind of newer to teaching the preschool age, is that I asked them questions about how they would use this at home. Can you think of a time that you flipped your lid? Get the kids to answer that. Are there times you can put it back on? And often in the preschool, every kid has an answer, which to me is kind of impressive, that they're actually reflecting on their mental states, and they're understanding the material, and certainly gets them very engaged. And so ask them questions about examples, how they use it at home. Do they recognize those states, those sorts of things? How do you get your smart part back on at home? What works for you? And to get them engaged that way. But I was very surprised, especially once you hit 4 or 5, they get very, excited about sharing their ideas, and it's impressive actually. And I will tell you, because I do typically it's an 8-week program. I go into each class for 15 minutes, 1 week apart. And when I come back, even the last week, when I come in and ask them, have you used mindfulness at all at home or at school to put your smart part back on when you were about to flip your lid? And they actually come up with real examples. I'm like, this is impressive. So do not, if you're new to preschoolers in the preschool age, do not underestimate how much they're understanding, how much they're actually applying. Even if it's, once a week for 8 weeks, they get more out of it than you realize.
Yeah, that's so true. We have so many stories of, kids going home and teaching their parents how to breathe and how to quit. So Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
really great. So what's your fifth tip for us, Diane?
My fifth tip was one that really, I think, applies to someone who is an outsider coming into to the classroom and doing this lesson for 15, 30 minutes, once or twice a week, whatever that might be. And that is to manage the preschool kids and their behavior. And like I was talking about before, there's this real sweet spot where they're engaged, they're having fun, but they're not overstimulated. And so making sure you're always monitoring that and calming them down when you need to, and using, your role as an authority figure to do that. And certainly if you're a preschool teacher, this is what you do all day long. But for those of us who are coming in, visiting, certainly I was more comfortable working with older ages. And so I was surprised at how much discipline I kind of had to do, and developing strategies for that in terms of how you set some of it up. And so, I had one class where every single kid wanted to raise their hand and give an example. And it was like 15 kids, and it's like we weren't getting through the lesson. And so learning how to go, we just organized that, I was like, we're going to run out of time if we actually, and it's great to see them so enthusiastic, and it would be like, we'd go around the circle, the first 5 or whatever, that sort of thing. Or, one time I did a meditation. There's a practice where you use a drum and you beat it slower and faster, and you have them kind of move around. And I learned very quickly, I had to glue their feet down. Not really, with imaginary glue. But otherwise, if I let them move their legs, to the rhythm to try to get them, so to move really big, before I knew it, they were all over the place and had left their spot. I thought they could maybe jump in place. Naive. I didn't spend a lot of time in preschools. So, adapting and noticing where you're kind of losing control, or where they're getting overstimulated by the exercise, and figuring out ways there is this sweet spot, and it's easy to overstimulate preschoolers with mindfulness. And so you have to monitor that and make sure you design the activities so that you keep them engaged, but don't overstimulate. And, one time we did have a kid who had to get removed on a regular basis. And thank goodness, the preschool teachers stepped in, they were on it. And this was a kid who had known, problems. And I think everyone was hoping the mindfulness would help him act out less. So, I've done it with a couple hundred preschool kids. And there was one time where there was a kid who was particularly he was just too overstimulated by it, and he just could not self-regulate. He actually ended up having to leave the school because it just wasn't working out. So it is possible to have a kid like that, and to really think about when you're designing lessons. And every preschool is different, so you always have to remember that. And knowing that as you design these lessons, to think about how would we deal with the behavior problems, and to think about that and plan the lessons, where you're going to do it, where you're not going to do it. There are certain lessons I will only do outside because they might be messy, that sort of thing. So that's, I think, the challenge I've really had is, if you know to keep the lessons small, and you can do that, and you keep a playful attitude, and that you do have to sometimes manage and be strategic. How might a 3-year-old go off the rails with this, and try to plan for that, and look at the space, look at the room, always look at the space you'll be teaching in, because it doesn't take much to distract a preschooler. So making sure you've set it all up so that they can be focused it takes some doing. That would be my last tip.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like looking at it from, whether it's a totally different experience. I think of it as somebody coming in and doing the lessons, to whether if you're just incorporating it into your class lessons. So thanks for sharing those tips, especially for people that aren't used to teaching preschool, because as you say, it's I think it's the best age, but you have to know what to do. But as you mentioned, otherwise you could get in a bit of trouble if you have a classroom and you're trying to teach them as though they're in grade 5 or something, which I've seen a few times before. So, tell us what about the reaction from, so you're like coming in and your interns are coming in. So what have the teachers said and what have the parents said about what's going on in the school with these different programs?
Yes, so the teachers love the mindfulness program, and I think what they've done is that the preschool teachers, I think, use the mindfulness the most in the whole, preschool to 5 teaching school context. And what they use the mindfulness concept of this core practice, where, if you're not familiar with that, it is when you ring up the bell at major transition points. And the chime, I've timed them. I have to go around timing them. But it's really just 30 to 60 seconds. You ring one of those classic chimes, and you want to find one that hopefully goes 30 to 60 seconds is really all you need for the preschool. But they do it for all the major transition points. And so this is a preschool that has an academic component where they do need to sit down a few times a day and do their lessons for 10, 15 minutes where they practice letters and such. But they use it at the beginning of the day, they use it before lessons, and then, when they come in from recess or from lunch, this chime is used to help the kids put on their smart part. And so the teachers use it about 4 times a day. And when you think about that, that is 4 minutes of mindfulness practice, which is phenomenal, really, even for an adult to achieve. If you haven't tried your own practice, it really is, pretty impressive. And so they really integrate it into the school day on a regular basis and into the rhythm. And especially, kids are hyper when they're coming in from lunch, or, they really want to have them focus as best they can for a lesson. And so that's when they use the chime. And you have to be careful. We had an issue at the school where some of the teachers were using the chime to get the, ring, ding, 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 to get their attention, because it was a bell. And if you are going to use the chime, you want to make sure it is only for mindfulness, for 30 to 60 seconds of mindfulness. So you actually need to calm the class down, and then you ring the chime and you have them focus on the sound of the chime. So, and you don't intermix it with, sometimes it's, it's a gong, 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 gong. I need your attention. You guys are all too loud. Get a different instrument for that. But the preschool teachers have really, really found that very useful. And I think the concept of flipping your lid, because every preschool teacher knows what that is, but to understand the neurophysiology behind it, I think it really helps the teachers have patience, with the kids. And it actually helps the kids have patience with each other, because they are aware now when other kids are flipping their lids. And I do believe that there's a certain amount of peer pressure to not flip your lid. And there certainly is more compassion for each other when they do. And so the parents have access to a website also, and I've had a lot of parents come to me and tell me how helpful it was to just understand what flipping your lid is, what lizard brain smart part, because they're often, most parents, it is so tempting. I am a parent and I still want to do it myself. I find myself saying, there's no need talking to a lizard, Diane. The lizards just don't get it. But many of the parents have said understanding that concept, because they've tried. It's natural as a parent to want to try to talk reason to a child who's flipping their lids. And so parents have said that they found that particularly helpful, is understanding that concept and knowing that you just got to help the kid get their smart part on in as compassionate and kind a way as you can. And then we can do behavior management usually a little bit after that. So the parents have found it very helpful, because it is very true. The kids will come home and start talking about their lizard brain and their smart parts, and the parents are like, what are you saying? What are you talking about? So it's been important to educate the parents, because the kids get it. They understand the language. They understand the concepts, and they will just spontaneously start educating their parents about it at home. And so I've had several families saying that they use that concept, they get the chime themselves, use it at home. And so it's been a great success. And the parents and the teachers have found it, both the concepts as well as the practice, very useful.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And it's great, that it's coming from, at home and at school, and that the children are helping to teach everyone, as they always do, I think, in all areas, about ourselves. So yeah, I just want to remind everyone, we'll have the links to the website, but there's lots of great practical videos on there that will be really helpful to see things in action. And I just want to say thank you again, Diane, for coming on and sharing those tips with us, and telling us about how the program works, and giving us some ideas to implement, especially the puppets. I think is a really great one, and Dan Siegel's work as well is he was on our summit last year, actually. Yeah. So and he's on the Mindful Kids Peace Summit this year. So thank you so much. And I will just leave it there and let everyone, if you want to find out more information, as I mentioned, Diane's got some great books, which we'll have links to, as well as the videos. So thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.